We have a very beautiful gospel account in today's reading. And of course, it's St. Peter, and we know he's the head of the apostles. So here we see him, he's taking the initiative. You know, they see our Lord walking on the water, they think he's a ghost, and our Lord says, "It is I, do not be afraid." And Peter says, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." So he takes the initiative, but St. Peter is also known for his impetuosity. He just says things without thinking about it. I mean, who would say that? Imagine you in that scene. Would you say, "Lord, if it's you, have me come and walk to you on the water"? In other words, you're going to get out of the boat and you're going to walk on the water? Like, would you even imagine yourself being able to do that? Well, St. Peter does. And I think in that effort to get out of the boat and to walk to our Lord, we see that he begins to sink at some point. But I think the most crucial part of his effort to do this was the very first step. The very first step. Imagine that very first step when you're just getting out of the boat and you got to put your foot down and you have to trust that you're not going to sink. And there's something to be said for that. They say that when it comes to undertaking various tasks, we tend to hesitate sometimes because we're so overwhelmed by the magnitude of the task, the burden of the task. And, especially sometimes for young people, whether it's sitting down to study, they just feel a hesitancy. And they say once you take the first step, the rest is easier, a lot easier. And I think the same can be said in regards to vocations, to the priesthood, or to the religious life. Sometimes young people think, I just can't take the steps for this. It's too great a thing to consider. And they think, well, I just can't do it. And in reality, it's true. None of us are worthy. None of us can really do it. But it's the grace of God that sustains us. It's the grace of God that allowed St. Peter to be able to walk on the water. Now, as we see, once he takes his focus off our Lord and he sees the wind and the waves, he begins to doubt, he becomes frightened, and he begins to sink. Now he cries out, "Lord, save me," and our Lord pulls him up. "Oh, you of little faith," indicating that our Lord will save us, that our Lord will help us when we feel ourselves sinking. And that's actually a good reminder for us to remain focused on our Lord. So for you and I, there may be tasks in our lives that we have to do, some project we're going to undertake, and you may have experienced this. There's a little hesitancy to get started. The most important thing is get started. Once you get started, things flow much better and you're able to get a lot more done than just procrastinating and trying to plan and figure everything out in advance. This idea of focusing on our Lord is very important. And the ideal is that we're constantly focused on our Lord. But today we celebrate the feast of St. Peter Julian Aymard. And he died in 1868. And he is especially noted for his devotion to the Eucharist. In fact, when he was a young man, he very much lamented the fact that there is no religious order dedicated to honoring our Eucharistic Lord. And so he started a congregation of priests that would focus on Eucharistic adoration. They would recite their prayers, the prayers of the breviary in the presence of our Eucharistic Lord. They would practice perpetual adoration. They would take turns. And he also made a confraternity for priests. So for other priests who weren't part of their congregation, but encouraging priests to spend at least 1 hour in Eucharistic adoration a week. Now, of course, we should do more than that. I think as priests, we shouldn't let a day go by without spending some time in the presence of our Eucharistic Lord. And he also started a religious order for women, once again dedicated to perpetual adoration, and also a kind of third order for the laity, once again encouraging Eucharistic adoration. So some of that was already taking place previously, but he kind of formalized all these things and encouraged people or reminded people of the importance of Eucharistic adoration, that all graces flow from our Eucharistic Lord. The love of God flows from our Eucharistic Lord. And I think, especially when we consider that he died in 1868, and if you think of the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima, they occurred in 1917, and the year before, the Angel of Portugal, which is Saint Michael, appeared and taught the children a prayer to make reparation to our Eucharistic Lord, and that prayer also promotes Eucharistic adoration and strengthens our faith, or reminds us of the importance of our faith in the Eucharist. And if you recall the vision of St. John Bosco near the end times, when the ship representing the church is being battered by the waves, until these two pillars appear, and on one is the Eucharist, and on top of the other is Our Lady. And it's only when this great ship is tied out to these two pillars, that's when the ship is safe and secure, and all the other ships come in it and attach themselves to the ship, which is the church. So it's kind of a reminder that near the end times, belief in our Lord's true presence in the Eucharist is going to diminish. And not only that, but irreverence towards our Eucharistic Lord is going to increase. And if people don't believe, well, it's obvious that devotion to our Eucharistic Lord will diminish, and that all kinds of sacrileges will be committed. So in other words, people receiving who shouldn't be receiving, or people receiving irreverently, or people just receiving without thinking anything about it, without the realization of what an important sacrament this is, of what this really is. One commentary for today's gospel reading, it pointed out that when they see our Lord and they think that he's a ghost, and our Lord speaks out and he says, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." They point out that in the English translation, we lose some of what our Lord was really saying. So what our Lord really said is, "Take heart, I am who am. Do not be afraid." In other words, he said the very same words that God said to Moses when Moses went up the mountain and asked God his name, and God revealed, "I am who am." Now, it's true that it does have that sense that I am, it is I, right? But we lose it in the translation. So in the original, or at least in the Hebrew, it would have been there. And when we think of our Lord, he's walking on the water and he's saying, "Look, I am who am. I am God. I can do this. I'm not a ghost. I am God." And St. Peter says, "Okay, if you are God, then bid me come to you." And so we lose that sense. So Jesus is God, yes, and he's able to do all things. And if we focus on our Lord all the time, yes, we need to spend some time in Eucharistic adoration. We can't be there all the time. But the ideal is that we focus on our Lord throughout the day, at all times, that everything that we do is intended to please God. So the point I was trying to make with St. Peter Julian Aymard is he was preparing people, reminding people of the importance of Eucharistic adoration, to remind us of who and what the Eucharist is. It is Jesus. It is he who is I am who am. In the Eucharist, the source of all grace, the source of all blessings, the greatest gift conceivable, the treasure without limit. It is the greatest good. Our ability to receive Holy Communion, even if it were just once in our entire life, would benefit us more than anything else that we could ever experience or have in this world. That is the reality, and we lose sight of that reality in the same way that St. Peter lost sight of our Lord and began to sink. We need to be strengthened in our faith. So St. Peter manifested great faith, great courage in his ability to take that first step to walk on the water, to walk towards our Lord. And this is what we are called to do through any and every difficulty. If we keep our eyes on our Lord, we can do it. Yes, we may have to suffer. We may even die. But as long as we keep focused on our Lord, focused on his love, focused on the fact that he will save us from all spiritual harm, then we need not be afraid of anything. As our Lord says, take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid.